On episode 5 of The Amazing Race season 37, the teams stay in Bali for another leg, but instead of the jungle, we end up at the beach, so let's get into it. Okay, you guys, I have to say, me and Charlie were talking about this right before this. The challenges were not so intense this episode, but what made it was the drama.
Yes, so much.
It starts out dramatic, it ends dramatic, there's drama all throughout. This is the Amazing Race that we know and love. This felt very old school Amazing Race to me. So the episode starts with the teams being instructed to meet Phil at a local sanctuary. And once they're there and Phil's there and all the teams arrive, Phil announces that they're all going to participate in a live vote double U-turn. So we've seen the U-turn done in the past. We've seen the double U-turn, I think, happen in the past. But typically how it works is there would be a board and people just put in their votes.
Yeah.
And then whoever gets the most ends up having to do it. And you also don't know who votes. And normally it's anonymous. So the fact that it's live is crazy, and that it's double is crazy, because the power of the U-turn is that you have these teams that are often in the lead throughout most of the season, and you're able to kind of yank at them a little bit and see if you can get them to fall down in ranking.
Right.
Super fascinating. So the two teams with the most votes, like I mentioned, will end up having to do a U-turn and do both detour challenges. So this is how the votes fell. Scott and Lori received 4 votes, Jonathan and Anna received 4 votes, and then Nick and Mike received 1 vote. So Scott and Lori and Jonathan and Anna are the 2 teams that are being double U-turn.
I will say I was surprised that Nick and Mike got the 1. I was surprised that Garrett and Jackson didn't get a vote.
Yeah.
Because they've been in the top 3 almost the entire race so far.
Yeah.
I will say, too, I kind of wish for the vote they would have done 2 rounds of it, one for the first team and then one for the second team, just to see a little bit more instead of splitting that vote like that so much.
That would have been interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting way to do it. Maybe they'll do it like that in the future. But I will say, I think to the Nick and Mike comment, I think people think about, I think it goes back to that very typical like way of strength. Like they're very, their physique is very large and muscular, and I think people always see that as a very physical threat.
That's true.
Even though they really haven't done that well. I mean, they've been very middle of the pack, so to me they're not really a threat.
Right.
But I don't know, I could see how that works.
I will say I did love that during this live vote, you had some of the teams call out Scott and Lori, being like, you guys are really playing into that, oh, we're old, we're slow, you know, but, and they're like, you've been in the top this whole time. And then, you know, Lori clapped back a little bit at some of the votes, like, they're not our friends now.
Yeah.
The ones that voted for us. It's like, oof.
Yeah, I have more on that later. Don't let me forget. Okay, so we head into the detour for this episode, which was coconuts or coral. Both these challenges were simple, but also seemingly challenging, so it's kind of interesting. So in coconuts, they're tasked with loading a bike with 60 coconuts and delivering them to a nearby beach cafe before having to stack all 60 coconuts on a rack, 30 on the top, 30 on the bottom. And then in coral, the teams had to attach 5 species of coral to a reef star before snorkeling out into the water and depositing this into a coral reef restoration area.
I will say, I liked both of these.
I did too. Here's what's funny is, to me, the coral one almost seemed easier, but you had to have the species correct, and I think that's what would have been challenging.
And that's what stumbled some of the teams up. Like, especially when Jonathan and Anna got there, they didn't pay attention to having to have the specific species in a certain spot. They're just like, okay, throw the coral on there, let's get it done. And it took them like 3 to 5 times to get it figure out that they have to have that specific coral.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say, because spoiler, not spoiler, because Lori and Scott and Jonathan and Anna are U-turned, the episode really kind of spotlights both of those teams, whereas everyone else is just kind of there, in my opinion. So let's get into Jonathan and Anna for a second, because I had thoughts, I know you have thoughts, and all of social media was buzzing about this too. We've been talking about all season how Jonathan and Anna are this married couple where they are not shy that they had issues in the past. And they've come on this show to maybe kind of help their marriage out a bit. They've done very well throughout the season, but Jonathan is very intense, and a lot of people feel like he's very rude to his wife, which I agree with.
I agree.
And it's really sad because Anna just seems so sweet and genuine, and Jonathan just gets so hot-headed and angry and does not know how to control it or respectfully speak to his wife in a way that is appropriate.
Yeah.
And we see that play out in this episode. You see, I think, they did the coral first? Or
they did the coconuts first, because he hits himself in the head with a coconut, and then after that, he's in a bad mood the whole time. He's like, I've got a headache, I'm tired, and then he basically becomes this pouty baby, and, and almost, it seems like he almost gives up, in my opinion, for the most part.
The other thing that really threw me about them, and he minorly redeemed himself with this, but in the coral part, so as I said, after you kind of assemble your reef star, you have to take both parts of your team, both people in the team have to go out, and there's like a buoy mark, and you go out there and you have to put in. Both of you have to go out there. Now, only one person has to go down and actually put it in, but you both have to get in the water. Well, we learned that Anna's kind of got this fear of water because as a kid she like had a near drowning incident, if you will, so she has a little bit of PTSD. What threw me was Jonathan has been like repeatedly kind of rude and inappropriate towards his wife, but I'm like, you would think that in a moment like this, he would at least step up, and I really don't feel like he did.
No.
Like, I just kept thinking, I'm like, if I'm on this show with Jory, and Jory's like, you know, makes it clear, this is one of my biggest fears, I'm like, why would I not do everything I can to make her feel more comfortable or at ease? And I'm like, especially as a married couple, like that part threw me so much. And he kind of said like after, because they end up completing it and like, he says he's proud of her and things, but like, I don't know, that part like really left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, he really just showed how short his fuse is.
Yeah.
And then once that fuse is burnt and he's in that mood, there's almost no way to get him out of that. He's gonna stay and be grumpy and just honestly not nice to his wife.
Yeah.
Which like you said, you should be supportive.
Yeah.
And you know, Anna was being very supportive when they got done with the coconuts.
Yeah.
She's like, just give him a second. He just, you know, needs it. And he was just kind of being a real jerk.
Yeah, and I think what well, here's the thing. They're bad on their own in their own right, but I think what doesn't help them either this season is that Lori and Scott, on the flip side, also a married couple, are kind of like little angels on earth. Like, they seemingly are very genuine. They speak to each other very well.
Yeah.
They have a lot of love, and it's very obvious. They seem to have a very good marriage. They're very encouraging, very supportive. And so I think it's like when you're looking at these two teams being heavily spotlighted this whole episode, and you've got one that's talking to each other like dirt, and you've got one that's talking to each other the way you probably should be talking to your spouse, people are gonna dog on you probably a little bit harder too.
Absolutely, yeah, that's
So
true.
I think that plays into it. So then we move on to the roadblock, which I really like this one too. This was interesting. So it's kind of this idea of just like finding your match, quote unquote. So one person from each team had to take a surfboard from a rack. There was a sticker on top, and you swam out to this big group of like locals or surfers or whatever they were, and you had to find another surfboard that had the same exact sticker as you did. Once you had that, you said, "Come with me," and you both swam back to shore and showed the judge to get your clue. Honestly, almost all the teams killed this. Even like, I will say, and it's not because an age thing, I just genuinely didn't think he would do well at this, but when Pops got in there.
Pops did great.
I was like, oh, I'm nervous. Because even Jeff was like, I probably should have done this, but he killed it. Pops did so good. I was like, okay, King. It was so good to see him do this. So honestly, really all the teams did very well, but once a freaking kid, Jonathan gets on the surfboard and has the worst attitude about it and is moving so slow. And I'm like, sir, I get you're tired. I get you have a headache. I get you have all these things. You were on The Amazing Race. You're competing for $1 million. Your wife and yourself have done such a good job up to this point.
Yeah.
Also, there is a good chance you're going to go home because also, we haven't said this yet, but basically, at some point in the episode, it basically comes down to being between Lori and Scott and Jonathan and the rest of the time. So it's obvious that one of them will be eliminated, which is crazy because they've been the top two teams the last like 3 legs. But I'm like, sir, do not give up on your wife like this. Like, you guys have done such a good job, and you just literally don't care, and it is so clear that you have a great chance of being eliminated, so why are you acting like this?
Well, he gets out there amongst all the surfers, and he basically just lays on a surfboard and like gives up again. It's like, get up and go. You are almost to the finish line. And he would be even more mad if you cost you guys yourself the loss.
Yeah.
I think he was probably in a bad mood from the U-turn.
Yeah.
And then it just got worse the whole day.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I'm sure it was hot. I don't know what the temperature was because they don't make that clear, but I'm sure it was hot. Also, I think anything water related can be very taxing on your body.
Absolutely.
So I get that. And they had to do both challenges, and one that was water based and one that was very physical and weight based. But still, not an excuse to give up and treat your wife like dirt. So here's what's interesting. I'll share more thoughts after, but here's what's interesting. So then it literally comes down to, oh, well, hold on. Sorry, back up. Pit stop. We get to the pit stop. Brett and Mark get first, which was really exciting because it was going to be them or I think...
It was Jackson and Garrett.
Yeah. And so it was interesting to see kind of how that... But Brett and Mark got their first win of the season, and they also win $10,000.
And Jackson and Garrett literally joined them at the mat.
Yeah.
So they were it was very close again.
It was very close.
Yeah.
So then it comes down to a very tight finish between Jonathan and Anna and Lori and Scott. And unfortunately, Lori and Scott are the ones eliminated. Jonathan and Anna are able to get there before Lori and Scott. But here's what I was going to say is, one, even going to the pit stop, Jonathan is being so rude to his wife. She's like, come on, babe, we can do this. Yeah. And he's like, stop talking. Literally. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't want to hear it. I have a headache. That's annoying me. And I'm like, she's just trying to be so, like, this drove me insane. And I know they're getting a lot of backlash. And I know they're probably annoyed by it. But I'm like, also, this is what happens when you go on national television and you treat your wife like this. Like, I don't know what they're expecting.
Well, yeah, basically, so true. I really wanted them to get out. I felt bad for Anna, but at the same time, it's like, you guys got to go. Because if he's not going to put in that effort, why stay?
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll come back in the next episode and be like, oh, yeah, I'm fine, you know, let's get it and everything like that.
Probably get first place somehow, which annoy me. But
yeah.
I will say, going back to something you said earlier with Lori and Scott. So I spoke to them this week. They were the eliminated team I spoke with. But I did kind of ask them what they thought about the double U-turn vote and what they thought about people thinking they were a threat and all these things. I take everything with a grain of salt, but I do believe them. They had said, they were like, we genuinely did not see ourselves as a threat level, and here's why. They were saying, they were like, we realized we were good at challenges, but we were only good at challenges because we had good communication. They were like, we genuinely were not fast. Like, running was our biggest weakness. So if it came down to getting from one task to the other, she was like, we were always going to be last. She was like, we are just not fast people. So she's like, that's what I meant. She's like, what bothered me, though, and they both said this, was when Brett and Mark started to question, like, their genuineness, because they were like, that's really who we are as people. Like, we are nice people, and that's how we treat people. And so she was like, so I was upset that I thought we built these relationships on the show and our character was being questioned. And I had to agree with him saying, you know, I think an attack on character transcends game, because there's game and then there's attacking you as a person. And I think those can be separate.
Yeah, but at the same time, too, most of those teams weren't anywhere ever around Lori and Scott to see how they, you know, moved in between the stops and everything. So they might have thought that they were moving pretty fast, considering they were almost always in the top 3.
Yeah.
It makes it hard when you're not actually getting to see how the other teams are playing.
Well, for sure. And I mean, perception's reality. And so it's like, you know, it's what you perceive that to be. And so for Lori and Scott, they probably really did feel like we are not a threat. And I do believe them on that point. But from other teams, like if I was on the show, I'd also think they're a threat.
Yeah.
If you're getting second or first place every leg, I mean.
Right. It'd be very interesting to talk to players after they've watched the whole season through and be like, what were your takes on Scott and Lori now that you saw how, you know, how they actually worked together throughout these first 5 legs? So it'd be very interesting.
That would be interesting. So we have 8 teams left, which I can't, the season's just moving right along. And here's what's crazy. They travel again to a new place this next episode, and they're traveling to Dubai, which I think is going to be really exciting. We've both seen a few sneak peeks of the episode, or not of the episode, but of what's happening in the episode. First of all, I know that they skydive.
Couldn't be me.
Which could not be me. I've always said that I could maybe do the Amazing Grace, but my biggest fear about doing it would be having to either skydive or bungee jump, because I'm not interested in either. Also, though, it looks like a really jam-packed episode, because look, they skydive, they do like the sand surfing, like in the desert, and then there's also, I think, actual water something based surfing. So I don't know. I think it's gonna be a really exciting episode. I'm excited to see how this fares, but I don't know. Here's the thing. This episode proved that this season really is anyone's game. This episode changed everything. So it'll be interesting if Jonathan and Anna can make a comeback. If Jonathan decides to be nice to his wife, and if a new team takes first place. So I don't know. You'll have to tune in. We'll be tuning in Amazing Race Wednesdays on CBS.